But she was telling a wonderful story about Joe Nathan and Willie Lee trying to miss church, trying to miss out on that God of our weary years, God of our silent fears, God who has brought us thus far along the way, which was some more of the lyrics of that Lift Their Voices and Sing song. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and share my story about how God brought me along the way. It was a beautiful spring day. The sun was shining. The ocean breeze was blowing. We were walking down toward the oceanside pier. But I didn't want to be there. You see, I'm walking along the sidewalk. Most of the young people are marching right in the middle of the street. I'm wearing my mask. Most of them are not. Yet we're chanting, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. No justice, no peace. And we were calling their names. George Floyd, Breonna, Ahmaud, Trayvon, Emmett. I don't want to be here because I'm Black, I'm over 65, and there's a COVID pandemic. But I have to be here. You see, I grew up in Washington, D.C. My daddy moved from Sumter, South Carolina to D.C. to get away from the Jim Crow oppression. Mommy was fourth generation D.C. native. I grew up inhaling the atmosphere of memorials, monuments, and the mantras of liberty and justice for all and equal opportunity. I can remember going to the National Archives and tapping on the glass and seeing the words the founders had written on that parchment and thinking one day I want to see the America on paper become the America of reality. But it wasn't then. You see, when my parents bought their home, it was right in the middle of white flight. All the young white families moved out of the neighborhood, leaving the older whites behind. So our next door neighbors were an older couple, German immigrants, Martha and Joseph Paps. And Daddy decided we were going to be good Samaritan neighbors. That meant that I got a chance to shovel their snow and mow their lawn. And on Saturdays, they would take grandma with them to go to the old street market. But I knew what was going on. When I was 10, in 1963, in July, I heard there was a great march, civil rights march coming to DC. Well, on that day, Daddy got up early on that humid August morning, and he went down the march with the Washington Teachers Union. Mommy was also a teacher, but she took me down to be at the rally at the Lincoln Memorial. This was history. I mean, I was there when Dr. King said, I have a dream today. But you know what I remember most? I remember people standing in the reflecting pool with their skirts and their pant leg rolled up above their knee, cooling their aching, marching feet in the reflecting pool. I was appalled because Daddy always said, you don't wade in the water in the reflecting pool. But on that day, I reflected that maybe one day the America on paper would become the America of reality. But a few years later, 1968, Dr. King was assassinated and DC was ablaze. I remember being on my front porch, I could see people with grocery carts of food and clothing and arms full of new stuff they had gotten from their looting. My friends and I, we ran up to the high school and looked through the fence, and we could see the National Guard camped out on the football field. And that night, there was a knock on the door. It was Mr. Paps. Mr. Mozon, my friends out in the suburbs say if you put Soul Brother on your house, they won't burn your house down. Well, Daddy gave that assignment to me. So I got the glass wax, that pink lotion, and I wrote on the front windows of our homes, SOULBROTHA. Soul Brother. And then I went to Daddy and said, Daddy, it's not fair. They killed Dr. King, and you make me write Soul Brother on that white man's door. And Daddy said, son, that's what Dr. King would want you to do. Things were changing. In 1971, I had the option, and I chose to go to a predominantly white school down in the South because I wanted to be on the front line of this civil rights movement. So there, we Black students, we protested and we did petitions and we got Black hair products in the campus store. And we got Black faculty. And we got Black studies. And we even had our first Black homecoming queen, and the poet Dr. Maya Angelou came to teach at Wake Forest. But we also had a list of professors who were known to not treat Black students fairly and stay away from them, except Professor Frank was in the religion department, and I was a religion major. I had to take his course. And as hard as I tried, could never get any more than a C because that's the most he would ever give a Black student. And I told him, you're a hypocrite. You do not represent the religion that you teach. And he smugly smiled and said, yeah, but I can justify my grades. Plus, I have tenure and you have a C. So I took my C, but I still graduated cum laude. I chose to pursue my ministry calling as United States Navy chaplain. And when I took that oath of office in that commissioning, those words about protecting and defending the US Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic, was very personal. I said, maybe this is one way to make the America on paper become the America of reality. So in addition to preaching sermons and saving souls and working within the Navy to improve their diversity goals, I also had a chance to tell stories of Black excellence and Black history and Black achievement with special diversity events. Of course, being the US Navy was America's Navy. There were always some racial things to overcome, but I thrived, I survived, I was promoted, and I retired. May 25th, 2020. It was Memorial Day. But more than that, it was my mother's birthday, her 90th birthday. Now, our plans to have this big family gathering in Florida had to be transformed because of COVID to a big Zoom birthday party. And there, my 90-year-old mother had her friends and family from all over the country on her iPad in her apartment there in Florida. And since it was an election year, she started talking about what it was like the years that she volunteered to register voters and to work the polls on election day with the League of Women Voters. And this year, she was really proud because one of her sorority sisters was a candidate for vice president. Oh, it was a good party on Zoom for 90 years. But several hours after that party was over, I found myself screaming at the television, no, not again, as I watched that police officer murder George Floyd. When I talked to mommy about the Black Lives Matter marches, She said, I can't believe that after all these years, we're still marching for the same things. Oh, I wanted to reach out and hug her, but I couldn't. So in June, when some of the young people of my church organized the Black Lives Matter march, I appealed to the God of my weary years and God of my silent tears, and I had to be out there to join them. Marching was a way of giving mommy a hug. Marching was a way of showing solidarity with my son who was marching in Denver. When I marched, my daughter and my wife were praying for my safety. We had to march because the America on paper was not yet the America of reality. So we march, we work, we pray, we vote, because I too sing America.